Good morning. I'm going to wait a few moments while everyone makes it into the virtual room here, and then we'll get started.
Good morning, Your Honor. I'm your court reporter. I was on this the 5 days prior, so I'm back again. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for saying hello. And I think you didn't hesitate before, but please don't hesitate to stop us or let us know if anyone's talking too fast or if you need any spelling.
Yeah, we only had one person last time, so we're doing great.
Thank you. All right, I think we have everyone in the room so far, it looks to me, so I'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. It is June 20th, 2022. This is the rebuttal portion of the hearing for Phase 1B on the applications of North Kern Water Storage District in the City of Shafter, application 31673. City of Bakersfield, application 31674. Buena Vista Water Storage District, application 31675. Kern Water Bank Authority, application 31676. Kern County Water Agency, application 31677. And Rosedale Rio Bravo Water Storage District, application 31819. And these are all for permits to appropriate water from the Kern River system. This hearing is being held in accordance with the notice for public hearing dated January 12th, 2022, the amended notice of public hearing dated February 9th, 2022, the pre-hearing conference ruling of March 18th, and the procedural rulings of May 10th and June 7th. This hearing is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video are being recorded, and we'll post files of this recording to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If you are experiencing technical difficulties today, trying to communicate with us, please send us an email at admin.hrgoffice@waterboards.ca.gov. The AHO staff will be monitoring the email inbox and can let me know. Assisting me today are several staff of the Administrative Hearings Office: Nicole Mullen, Amy Blunk, Skylar Anderson, and Kyle Wooldridge. Ms. Mullen will again be handling the screen sharing of exhibits and moving along of the slides. So if you're a witness today, you may simply ask Ms. Mullen to advance to the next slide when you're ready in your presentation. And attorneys, you may address Ms. Mullen directly to please bring up a particular exhibit. If at any time I am experiencing technical difficulties during the hearing today and I'm not able to rejoin the Zoom conference within a few minutes, one of the staff will call a recess until I'm able to rejoin you. We will take breaks today, as is usual. We'll have at least one mid-morning break and then an hour for lunch. But if any of you need a break in the meantime, please don't hesitate to let me know. Sometimes I get rolling and I forget we need a break. And I do plan to hold us to a hard stop by 5 p.m. And will for the rest of the week also, so that we can plan the rest of our lives accordingly. I do plan to take appearances today since it's been a while since we've been together. To do that, I will identify each of the entities that filed NOIs, and as I do, if you are representing that entity, please unmute and state your name. And we will go in the usual order. I will start with the City of Bakersfield.
Good morning, Ms. Kunze. Colin Pierce appearing for City of Bakersfield, also appearing for City of Bakersfield during this phase of the hearing will be my partner, Julianne Ainsley. And I think we're gonna tag team the hearing for the most part. So either both of us or one of us will be present throughout the hearing.
Thank you, understood. Thank you, Mr. Pierce, and thank you, Ms. Ainsley. There you are, I see you. I see you down on my screen in the corner. Thank you. City of Shafter.
Good morning, Hearing Officer Kinsey, Sarah Foley of Best and Krieger for the City of Shafter. My colleague Wendy Wang might join later in the week.
Thank you, Ms. Foley, and thank you in advance to Ms. Wang. North Kern Water Storage District.
Good morning, Hearing Officer Kunze. This is Scott Cuney, Law Offices of Young Wooldridge, on behalf of North Kern Water Storage District.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Cooney.
Good morning.
Buena Vista Water Storage District.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Ryan Becerra of Barkowitz, Chronic, and Shanahan for Buena Vista Water Storage District. The district's general counsel, Isaac St. Lawrence, also is here and will be involved in the hearing this week as well.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra and Mr. St. Lawrence. Rosedale Rio Bravo Water Storage District.
Good morning, Jennifer Spalletta Law for Rosedale Rio Bravo.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Spalletta. Kern Delta Water District.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Craig Carnes with Ellison Schneider, Harrison Donlin for Kern Delta Water District. And Robert Donlin from my office is also on, as well as Richard Iger, the district's general counsel.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Carnes, Mr. Donlin, and Mr. Iger. Kern County Water Agency.
Morning, Ms. Kinsey. Nick Jacobs with Somax Simmons and Dunn, appearing on behalf of Kern County Water Agency.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Jacobs. Tulare Lake Basin Water Storage District.
Good morning,
morning,
Ms. Kinsey.
Hearing
This is
Officer.
Peter Keel. I'll be joined by Josh Fox. Josh Fox will be here all week. I will probably be only attending portions of this phase of the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Keel, and good morning, Mr. Fox. Kern Water Bank Authority.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Kevin O'Brien of Downey Brand for Kern Water Bank Authority. Also appearing with me will be my colleagues, Sam Bivens and Holly Tokar, and I'll ask them to briefly introduce themselves.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Sam Bivens, Downey Brand for the Kern Water Bank Authority.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Holly Tokar, Downey Brand for the Kern Water Bank Authority.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Bivens, and Ms. Tokar. The public interest group, I will go ahead and groups, I should say, I will list them off. Bring back the Kern River Parkway Foundation, Kern Audubon Society, Kern Cahuilla Sierra Club, Panorama Vista Preserve, and Center for Biological Diversity. Mr. Keats, do we have you on the line today? Maybe not today. California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Is there anyone else who intends to participate today who is, other than our witnesses, who has not already had a chance to introduce themselves? All right, good. Thank you. I thought I'd start just by noting the a word on the evidentiary objections and motions that were received. I think all of you probably saw on Friday, June 17th, I issued an evidentiary ruling on the objections to rebuttal evidence that the AHO has received. I realize there's still one outstanding motion, which is KWBA's motion for reconsideration of my May 5th evidentiary ruling about Dr. David's testimony. I don't plan to rule on that motion until after we hear from Mr. Torres on rebuttal, and then I will plan to make a ruling on that outstanding motion. With those notes, are there any other issues related to the evidentiary motions or related matters that we should deal with at this time? Mr. Jacobs, I see a hand.
Thank you. Well, I was hoping to maybe get some clarification on a couple of statements.
Great.
In the ruling. On page 7, in the last paragraph, second to last sentence, it says, on the other hand, the hearing officer does not have the authority to issue binding determinations of law. And then on the next page, this is related, page 8, second to last paragraph, after the number 2, it says the AHO may not have jurisdiction to determine with any binding effect the merits of Buena Vista's claim. I'm hoping to get clarification on what that means. I don't understand, and I want to understand it. So anyways, I'm hoping to get some clarification on what those things mean.
Sure. Well, let me start with the first. I think there is this, and I think one of the reasons I insist on hearing officer to make this clarification. And this is a new office, so I think these are good questions, and I'll explain my understanding of my position here, which is I do have authority as the hearing officer to make procedural rulings, of course, and those to the effect that to the extent they govern how these proceedings run, I suppose they're binding. What I was trying to make a distinction with on page 7 with respect to binding determinations of law is that ultimately it's the State Water Board that makes a final decision or order in any of the proceedings that are before me. So I can issue and have in this case issued rulings as to matters of law, but those rulings are not, in my understanding, in effect, binding on the parties really until if and when they're adopted by the State Water Board. The board is the final decision-making authority in these proceedings onto any matters of law or substance. I think my role in terms of the extent of my authority is to make procedural rulings and run the hearing and those types of determinations, but ultimately it is the State Water Board. So that's what I meant when I said binding determinations of law is simply that I could make a legal ruling and that would indicate my understanding of what the law is. And in some cases, I think, and whether in this proceeding or in other proceedings, that can be quite helpful to you and the parties, right? Because then you know what I'm thinking. But the State Water Board could decide that they disagree with me and make a different ruling. And that would be the ultimate ruling. So that was my clarification. On page 8, I think that's a different issue with respect to, I should pull up the ruling. But my understanding that was with respect to the effect of the legal agreements on KWBA. And it is not clear to me that the State Water Board, or the State Water Board, have jurisdiction to make rulings with respect to covenants or that run with the land and that type of thing. I think it's an open question, and I think a court of law is the appropriate place to address that. I also made the note that here, we would really have to get, even if I were to attempt to make some kind of ruling on that issue, I think there are a lot of factual questions related to the covenant and the transfers and things like this that we just haven't gotten into here, and that would take quite a bit of additional hearing time. So what I'm inclined to do is move forward. You have other venues, I think, to explore those claims if you think it's appropriate, and can do that. And of course, if a court of law makes a ruling, that is binding on the State Water Board. So that is my understanding and what I intended by those two statements. Is that helpful to you?
I think so.
Okay.
So on the first issue, I mean, you're going to issue a draft order, correct? It goes to the State Board. They consider it and they might change some things.
Right.
But you're still going to make legal rulings in that draft order.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it will be a proposed, I think the term is, well, let's talk about in detail what we've done in other matters. What I plan to do in this proceeding, at some point, I'll issue a draft proposed order for comment by the parties. And that will be a matter between me and you as the parties. You'll have a chance to comment. I'll consider those comments and often I think those comments may change the draft of that order. Then what I'm calling a proposed order will go to the board. That's the official proposed order that is submitted to the clerk of the board, and then will be placed at some point on the agenda for the State Water Board to consider, and they can adopt it in full. They can make technical changes. They can remand it back to me and ask me to consider additional evidence or reconsider legal rulings, et cetera. They could reject it and take on the proceeding themselves. Those are laid out in the statute, those possibilities. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. I think we're all trying to understand how these things work, and that's my understanding. Mr. Becerra, I see you're off mute, so I'm going to turn to you next if you have something you'd like to add or say on a different evidentiary issue.
It's not exactly on an evidentiary issue, but yes, the evidentiary ruling mentions in a number of places, and actually up front says you would like to have rebuttal in this hearing, mentions a number of specific points on which rebuttal may be allowed. I'd like to understand what our process is for determining how that would work. I think trying to figure that out on the fly this week might be a little tough. So I'm wondering if perhaps we might schedule a status conference for next week or sometime thereafter. But I'm interested in your perspective on how that would work. Do you see this as another round where we all submit whatever it is we think is appropriate, or will you be asking for specific things? Do you want us to propose things before we submit evidence? And I understand you may not have that all nailed down yet, but that's why my suggestion would be we have a status conference in the relatively near future, and perhaps even parties can propose what they'd like to present at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra. I entirely agree with that. I think that's quite helpful. And I think you're right. I haven't nailed down exactly. I do, as I said several times in the ruling, and you pointed out, I think serve rebuttal is appropriate. I do not have clear in my mind at this point whether or not it would be just a general serve rebuttal where parties will have a chance to respond to anything in rebuttal, or whether I want to make an attempt to focus that down in terms of efficiency so that we can focus on the issues that I think are really important for my understanding of the proceeding. So I haven't made that decision yet, and I think it would be helpful to hear from the parties on that. I think we should schedule a status conference. Let's just hold that for one moment, and I will see if anyone else has any comments on that. And then I'm going to ask all of us to bring up our calendars, and maybe let's go ahead and put something on the calendar in the next, whether it's next week or the following week in the near future. I anticipate we're all quite busy this summer. So rebuttal would be, later, not in the next, what is it? Let's see. I can say not in the next 2 months. I think we'd be looking out a little bit because we all have things. So, Mr. O'Brien, I see you're also off mute. Do you have anything to say on this or other issues?
Yes, on the issue raised by Mr. Becerra, I agree that a status conference would be helpful, but I think it would also be helpful if you could direct the parties to meet and confer prior to the status conference. I think there probably are some issues regarding rebuttal in which we can readily agree. There's perhaps others where we may disagree, and I think we could probably be more efficient if we had the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. That's helpful. So I think that what that suggests to me is we should set the status conference out just a little bit so you have time to talk to each other and work a few things out. Let's keep that in mind. Mr. Cuny, I now see that you are off mute. Would you like to add to this conversation?
I certainly support the notion of the meet and confer and the status conference. I'm fine with that. What I'm noticing, and this is just a question with regard to your evidentiary ruling, I think it's just a point of clarification. On page 4, on the very bottom of that page, in regard to the Tulare Lake Basin issue, I think you may have referenced the original testimony of Mr. Unruh, and it's with regard to, you say page 5, paragraph 18. And what I seem to note is that the correctory testimony, which you didn't cite, actually had different language. So I just flagged that. Maybe you want to take a review of that, or maybe you consciously decided to focus on the original as compared to the correctory testimony. But it seems to be just a minor difference there, and it may affect your ruling in what they said.
Thank you, Mr. Cuny. Can you, would you repeat for me I believe you said this was in page 5 of my ruling with respect to Mr. Unruh's testimony.
No, it's page 4 of your June 17th ruling.
Thank you.
The very last line, and the citation goes from page 4 to 5, and you reference page 5, paragraph 18. And it seems to be a citation to the original testimony as compared to the corrected testimony that has slightly different language in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. Cuny. Let me take a look at that. That may in fact be my error. So let me take a look and see if it changes anything. If obviously if that affects anything, either way, I'll issue some kind of correction so that the citation is appropriate. But I really appreciate bringing that to my attention. These evidentiary rulings, I tried to make every effort to take care, but they're detailed.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr. Cuny. Before we turn to our calendars, is there anyone else who has any comments about our status conference in terms of Sir Rebuttal or any of the evidentiary rulings? All right, let's turn to our calendars. I know once again, it's the summer and it's quite busy, so please let me know. I realize some of you may actually have plans to do things, especially those of you who have children out of school. So I'm initially looking at the week of July 4th. Does anyone have an absolute conflict on that the full week, or can we look at some specific days that week? Obviously not the 4th, but the 5th through the 8th.
Ms. Kinsey, I'm not available on the Friday, what date is that? The 7th or the 8th, I'm sorry. I've got a hearing in San Diego that day.
Okay, you're not doing something, well, maybe it's fun, but you're not, not doing
No, I'm
something.
gonna say, well, it could be fun hearing, depends on the outcome.
Okay, the 5th, 6th, or 7th, does anyone else have any absolute conflicts, the 5th, the 6th, or the 7th of July?
Ms. Kenzie, this is Peter Keel. I have a conflict on July 5.
Thank you. We
Ms.
are now
Kinsey,
down.
this is Jennifer Spoletta. I also have a conflict on the 5th and the morning of the 6th.
Okay. So I'm tentatively looking at July 7th. So far, no one has spoken up with a conflict. Also gives you a day or two more to talk to each other. Are there any comments or concerns if I set a status conference for the morning of July 7th, starting at 9 a.m.?
Ms. Kinsey, Ryan Becerra, I just have a meeting at 11. So 9 to 11 would seem to cover it.
Yes, we can hold that. We won't go past 11 o'clock, especially if you talk to each other, then we won't need to do that. That sounds fine. I will not take this one off calendar. So you know, you can count on this one. This is quite important, and it'll be good to deal with these issues. So I will go ahead. I will issue a notice, so we have it all formally. But I will issue a notice that we will hold a status conference on July 7th, starting at 9 a.m. and not to proceed past 11 a.m. And we will discuss Sir Rebuttal. I'm going to think about whether I want to be more specific, and I may give some more specific instructions, but I think it will essentially be what we talked about. I will ask the parties to meet and confer regarding appropriate topics for Sir Rebuttal, and how that might proceed. And then we will also at that time look at dates to conduct the Sir Rebuttal portion of the hearing.
Ms. Kinsey, do you want statements ahead of time?
Yes. Well, I want to give you as much time as possible. So I'll set the deadline for statements maybe just shortly, but maybe just the day before July 6th, so that you'll have a chance to talk and then report back to me. I'll read them before the morning of the 7th. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else on those issues? I'm going to briefly go over my understanding of the order of proceeding for today, but anything else on the evidentiary issues or Sir Rebuttal that we should talk about? All right, thank you very much for your comments and suggestions here. In terms of the order of proceedings, my understanding is we'll start with KWBA and its rebuttal witnesses today. I believe based on the submittal, we would start with Dr. Miltenberger, then Dr. Davids, Ms. Boisavain, Mr. Parker, and Mr. Torres. I'm quite certain we won't get that far today. I shouldn't say that. You never know, but it seems unlikely. I will ask for cross-examination after each witness. I think has been the best way to proceed. And then next we'll turn to Buena Vista as we proceed this week. After that, Kern County Water Agency, North Kern, and then finally Tulare Lake Basin Water Storage District. With that outline, are there any questions or comments about how we will proceed either today or the remainder of this week?
Are
Mr.
we
Jacobs,
going,
yes.
are we going to be cross-examining the water bank on the water bank's corrected testimony that was submitted on the 10th?
No, I excluded the corrected testimony.
Okay. I thought you excluded part of it.
I did. You're right. I excluded, I admitted
Voice of Anne.
Ms. Boisavain's corrected testimony. So yes, you would
Okay.
be cross-examining on that. And then the remainder was, I believe that was Dr. David's. I have that right?
Yes.
Excluded.
Okay.
Does that clarify? That's my understanding. Anything else before we get started?
Hearing Officer Kunze,
Yes.
you have us listed on behalf of North Kern as in the order and that's fine. Just to let all the parties know, we are not intending to call witnesses. We do have exhibits, documentary evidence that we would move into evidence, but that may affect the schedule of Tulare Lake. So that would be our only process in the rebuttal of affirmative evidence would be the submitted evidentiary documents.
Thank you, Mr. Cuny, for that clarification. I recall that, and I had you on the list because you have rebuttal exhibits, and we'll just plan to deal with your, consider your rebuttal exhibits at that time as I've slotted you in, just it'll help.
Perfect.
That's where I have you on my agenda. But thank you for that clarification because it does mean we'll move along more quickly.
Very good.
Anything else before I turn things over to Mr. O'Brien or Mr. Bivens? All right, with that, I believe Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Bivens, or Mr. Bivens, I see you're off mute, so maybe you are taking the lead on this. Please go ahead and call your first witness for us today.
Kern Water Bank Authority calls Dr. Scott Miltenberger.
Thank you. Dr. Miltenberger, I see you in my screen, so thank you very much. Good morning. Dr. Miltenberger, will you please raise your right hand for me? Dr. Miltenberger, do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much, and you may proceed with your a summary of your rebuttal testimony.
Thank you.
Hang on one second, Dr. Miltenberger. Ms. Mullen, could we have exhibit KWBA 37 up, please? And Dr. Miltenberger, while Ms. Mullen is getting your PowerPoint ready, is KWBA 025 a true and correct copy of your written rebuttal testimony?
Yes.
Once Ms. Mullen has that up, and it looks like that's going to be now, would you please summarize your testimony for the hearing officer?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Bivens. And good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Thank you again for wrangling the presentation, Ms. Mullen. Actually, in addition to the presentation, Ms. Mullen, would you also pull up KWBA 34 for easy reference as we move forward? Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Kinsey, considering that my rebuttal testimony is shorter than my case in chief testimony, I will endeavor to provide a very brief overview of my rebuttal testimony today. Ms. Kinsey, may we have the next slide, please, in KWBA 37? Thank you. There are 7 points or areas of disagreement that I have with Dr. Littlefield's testimony, places where conclusions reached from many of the same sources I examined are overstated, lacking in important context, reflect misinterpretations of primary sources, or require qualification based on the historical record. I've listed these 7 points here, and they serve to organize my rebuttal testimony. I'll take each of them in turn. Ms. Mullen, may I please have slide number 3? The first of these, Ms. Kinsey, is that Dr. Littlefield's testimony presents Miller and Lux as a dynamic and forward-thinking agricultural enterprise, one that cultivated an array of crops and used water in a range of ways. These claims as to the nature and intent of Miller and Lux's development of the lands that comprise Buena Vista Water Storage District today are overstated. Notwithstanding the fact that as a company, Miller and Lux engage in other economic activities, both prevailing historical scholarship and the historical record discussed by Dr. Littlefield and myself indicate that the company's primary focus.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Miltenberger. Could you please slow down? I know that you're reading from something, but I can't go that fast. Sorry.
Yes, I will. Thank you. The historical record discussed by Dr. Littlefield and myself indicate that the company's primary focus was the raising of livestock for slaughter from the late 19th century into the 20th century, both pre and post 1914. Catherine Miller and David Igler, as well as Dr. Littlefield in their monographs, recognize this historical fact. And this fact is reflected in myriad sources, including the title insurance litigation of the 19 teens. May we have the next slide, please, Ms. Mullen? The second point of disagreement that I have with Dr. Littlefield concerns the historical significance of Kern River flood control works, flood flows, and surplus waters, particularly prior to Isabella Reservoir. Dr. Littlefield's testimony pays scant attention to these issues and consequently fails to appreciate the historical significance of surplus waters prior to Isabella. Dr. Littlefield fundamentally misunderstands that the Kern Valley Water Company Canal was not, in fact, he confuses it with the present West Side Canal today. The Kern Valley Water Company Canal being a flood control channel and structure, and the West Side Canal being an irrigation structure. We can see this confusion in Buena Vista 641, where the Kern Valley Water Company Canal is identified as the West Side Canal. This confusion leads to an underappreciation that particularly prior to the construction of Isabella, that there were flows that reached Second Point that were in excess of what could be used in lands in the future district. And here I'll also note, just as a point of clarification, Ms. Kinsey, that regarding my testimony in paragraph 24, my written testimony, paragraph 24, that the specific discussion from Hammett's preliminary engineering report concerned Isabella Reservoir. I offer that information, though, as corroborating evidence of a recognition of surplus waters, unusable water unusable within the Buena Vista lands prior to 1914. Next slide, please, Ms. Mullen. The third area of disagreement that I have with Dr. Littlefield concerns the limitations of Buena Vista Lake Reservoir itself as a storage facility. Dr. Littlefield's testimony fails to grapple with numerous sources that identify the limitations of the reservoir. As I noted earlier, there's excess flows that couldn't be stored. The reservoir itself was subject to high evaporative losses. There was also the phenomenon of dead storage, water that was below the outlet gate. And I provided a couple excerpts here in my presentation that highlight these particular limitations and deficiencies of Buena Vista Lake Reservoir as a storage facility. Next slide, Ms. Mullen, please. The fourth area of disagreement I have with Dr. Littlefield concerns the historical import of Miller and Lux's water sales to oil companies. Regarding the use of water of Buena Vista Lake Reservoir, Dr. Littlefield offers that Miller and Lux sold water to oil companies from the reservoir. But the importance of this is minimal. Available evidence addressed by Dr. Littlefield himself indicates, first of all, that such water was in excess of Miller and Lux's needs. And in fact, water also came not just from the reservoir, but from other sources unrelated to the Kern River surface flow. The quantity of water itself that was sold, particularly from the reservoir, may actually have been relatively small compared to the water used for irrigation. The water itself appears to have been used outside the future district. And most notably, water sales were not contemplated under the district plan. May we have the next slide, please, Ms. Mullen. Thank you. The fifth area of disagreement I have with Dr. Littlefield concerns the prevailing understanding of the sources of groundwater recharge in the Buena Vista lands in the early 20th century. Dr. Littlefield asserts in his written testimony that groundwater recharge was possible on the Miller and Lux holdings within the future district. The historical record, however, indicates that as far back as the 1880s, there was a recognition that the soils of the area did not readily permit percolation. And in fact, drainage was required in order to facilitate water flow through the Miller and Lux lands. The Lippincott Means Report in 1919 indicated that such recharge was virtually non-existent in the Miller and Lux lands, and such recharge would instead occur above Second Point, not below Second Point. And it's a little hard to read, but on this slide here, I have a particularly pertinent quotation from the Lippincott Means Report on this point. Furthermore, there's no indication that groundwater recharge was an intended purpose or goal under the district plan. May we have the next slide, please, Ms. Mullen? An additional area of disagreement that I have with Dr. Littlefield concerns his assessment of the nature and extent of groundwater development within the present Buena Vista Water Storage District boundaries in the early 20th century. I find his assessment to be overstated. From W.C. Mendenhall's 1916 report, only 3 Miller and Lux wells can be placed definitively within the present district, possibly 4 additional ones. The locational information is not specific enough. That's offered in the Mendenhall report. But of these 7, it's worth noting that 2 were identified as unused, 3 provided domestic and stock water, 1 provided stock water exclusively, and 1 provided irrigation water exclusively. Review of the Lippincott Means Report of 1919 provides a much more detailed view of the groundwater situation. And I would just note parenthetically, Ms. Kinsey, that the Lippincott Means Report is less an appraisal, as Dr. Littlefield testified, but rather a proposal or a scheme for watering more lands within the Miller and Lux holdings, providing them with a greater and assured supply. It was a proposal that was not adopted. And as we know, as part of the district plan, a preference was given, to the lands south of Wasco Road for the Second Point waters that Miller and Lux, which Miller and Lux had an entitlement. May we take the next slide, please, Ms. Mullen? In his case in chief testimony, Dr. Littlefield testified that there were at least 57 Miller and Lux and partner wells in the area. A detailed comparison of the well data table that he provided, as well as map number 2, with the present Buena Vista Water Storage District boundaries superimposed, indicates that in fact there were 29 wells within the future district. And I have an additional breakdown here that I'd just like to walk through. Of these 29 wells, 23 provided stock water. 14 provided stock water exclusively. There were 10 irrigation wells, but none exclusively devoted to irrigation. 15 of the wells were rated as less than good in quality, either very bad, poor, or fair quality. Of the 11 good quality wells, only 6 of these had an irrigation component. And in looking at the Lippincott Means Report, at least 1 well seemed to be focused on that essential feature of the Miller and Lux use of these holdings, and that is the slaughtering of livestock. Additionally, there wasn't agreement among engineers about the feasibility of groundwater development circa 1919. The optimistic view of the Lippincott Means Report notwithstanding. Sidney Harding, for one, was not convinced that underground water could be effectively utilized. He would not be convinced of this until the late 1920s. W.C. Hammett, the architect of the district plan didn't propose groundwater development as an aspect of the district plan. He didn't propose acquiring any wells as part of the district plan. And this was despite the optimism that he seemed to have about the future possibilities of groundwater for these lands. In 1929, in reviewing the bond issue for Buena Vista Water Storage District, Hammett noted that groundwater was not part of the district plan, but that development had occurred since the plan had been drafted, and that that development had been undertaken by individual landowners and not the district itself. May we have the next slide, please, Ms. Mullen? The seventh point of disagreement I have with Dr. Littlefield's testimony concerns his assessment of the historical significance of Decision 1196 for the water right entitlements of Buena Vista. I believe some of that requires qualification. First of all, the hearings concerning the various rights within, or the hearings concerning the various applications, to appropriate water lasted only a day. And they didn't grapple with Buena Vista's pre-14 water rights. Both the water master and the subsequent, both the water master's report, and the subsequent staff analysis concluded that all the water in the basin was fully utilized. Both accepted as evidence the fact that no water had flowed out of Tulare Lake since 1878. However, from an historical vantage point, from this historical vantage point, the fact that there were flows into Tulare Lake is important context for understanding the district's pre-14 water rights. 1906 was the greatest year of available second point water prior to 1914, as identified in Hammett's analysis as a component of the district plan. And I've excerpted a piece here from that. I note parenthetically that 1906 was also identified as the greatest year of available second point water in Bulletin 9. 1906 was also a year in which water flowed into Tulare Lake. And it was a year in which such water, as noted by Hammett, was, quote, greatly in excess of the district's needs. And we could say then greatly in excess of Miller and Lux's needs. Notably, that figure for 1906, as determined by Hammett, 492,945 acre feet, is smaller, lower than the 516,000 acre foot figure identified by Dr. Littlefield as used. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miltenberger. We're moving right along, so I think at this point, it would be appropriate to go ahead and move straight into cross-examination of Dr. Miltenberger. Well, I'll look to you. Mr. Becerra, do you have questions for Dr. Miltenberger?
Yes, I do.
All right, Mr. Becerra, please, and we will take a break in 20 to 30 minutes, just to give you a fair warning, and Dr. Miltenberger, so you know. But if you need a break sooner, well, please let me know. Other than that, Mr. Becerra, please go ahead and you may begin your questions for Dr. Miltenberger.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up Exhibit North Kern 47? Dr. Miltenberger, do you see that North Kern 47 is the 1964 State Water Rights Board staff analysis, engineering staff analysis?
Yes.
And Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 9, which is table 4? And unfortunately, you'll need to rotate this counterclockwise 90 degrees, Ms. Mullen. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Mullen. Dr. Littlefield, do you see that the State Board Water Rights Boards, excuse me, Dr. Littlefield, do you see that the State Water Rights Board engineering staff labeled this table for quantities of water beneficially used?
Yes.
Do you see that it includes the second point right?
Yes.
By 1964, Buena Vista Water Storage District owned the vast majority of the second point right, correct?
Yes.
You're not an engineer, is that right?
That's correct.
You have no expertise in calculating the beneficial use of water, correct?
Yes. Correct.
So you cannot disagree with the beneficial use total stated in this table, correct?
I can't assess this as an engineer because I'm not an engineer.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can you please go to the next page, PDF page 10? And unfortunately, you have to rotate this one as well. And can we scroll down a little bit more? Thank you. Dr. Miltenberger, do you see that for the year 1952, the State Water Rights Board engineering staff concluded that 516,400 acre feet was beneficially used under the second point right?
We scroll up to the top so I could see. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. And may we then scroll back down? Yes, I see that.
Just to confirm, you see that in this table, the State Water Rights Board engineering staff concluded that 516,400 acre feet were beneficially used under the second point right in 1952, correct?
I see that's listed in this table, yes.
Do you understand that to be the engineering conclusion of the State Water Rights Board staff?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to Dr. Miltenberger's testimony, KWBA 25, and go to PDF page 3. I'm sorry. Can we go up to the previous page? I'm looking for paragraph 2. Thank you very much. Dr. Miltenberger, on lines 10 through 11, you recite a number of terms that you've used to reference Buena Vista Water Storage District. Is that correct?
Yes, District Buena Vista or BVWSD.
And when you use those terms in your testimony, you're referring to the lands within the current Buena Vista Water Storage District. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see on lines 10 through 11, you also state your testimony concerns the intent of Miller and Lux's development of those lands?
Yes.
Okay. And just for clarity, I'll probably use the term Buena Vista a number of times in asking you questions. When I do that, I intend to mean Buena Vista Water Storage District. Do you understand that?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to page 7 of this exhibit and paragraph 16? Thank you. Dr. Miltenberger, on lines 13 through 17, you discuss irrigated acreage within the future Buena Vista as of 1914, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? I think I lost it a little bit.
On lines 13 through 17, when you talk about the lands you're talking about the lands within the current Buena Vista, is that right?
Yes,
And you identify those as approximately 43,600 acres as of 1914, right?
Objection, misstates testimony.
Maybe Mr. Becerra, if you can just have Dr. Miltenberger state what his testimony says, and then we can go from there.
Do you see that you recite 43,600 acres on line 17?
yes,
And that's your opinion is that that's the most reasonable approximation of irrigated acres as of 1914 within the current Buena Vista, correct?
correct.
Do you know roughly how many acres there are within the current Buena Vista?
I believe I've seen a figure of 50,400 acres. But I would need to refresh my memory on that.
Oh, thank you. As of 1914, Miller and Lux owned most of those acres. Is that right?
I don't understand the question.
Okay, that's fine. Can we please pull up Dr. Miltenberger's exhibit KWBA 35, please? Dr. Miltenberger, this exhibit is your Westlaw printout of the title insurance versus Miller and Lux decision by the California Supreme Court, correct?
Correct.
And that decision was issued in 1920?
Correct.
Okay, Ms. Mullen, can we please go to the bottom of page 2 of this exhibit? Dr. Miltenberger, do you see at the bottom of page 2, the California Supreme Court began to state a table of acreages?
Yes.
And Ms. Mullen, can we please scroll down to the next page in the exhibit? And do you see that the California Supreme Court continued that table here on the next page?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that the landowners listed in that table are the landowners who agreed in 1897 to cooperatively litigate the Lux versus Hagen case?
Yes, I understand that.
Do you understand those are the landowners who became the parties of the first part in the 1888 Miller-Hagen agreement?
I would need to double check because I think some of the names might have, well, I need to double check some of the names, but I believe that's correct.
And the parties of the first part in the Miller-Hagen agreement became the owners of what we now understand to be the second point right in the Kern River. Is that right?
Well, as I testified in the case in chief, I'm much more comfortable saying the second point entitlement.
Okay, we'll accept that term. The parties of the first part in the 1888 Miller-Hagen agreement established what we now know as the second point entitlement in the Kern River, correct?
Well, I believe they negotiated that. That was part of the water settlement.
Thank you. Do you see on exhibit KWBA 35 that in 1920, the California Supreme Court stated that as of 1879, those landowners collectively owned 98,188 acres?
Yes.
Is that more than 40,000 acres greater than the existing Buena Vista service area?
Yes.
Do you know whether those 98,188 acres included what is today's Buena Vista service area?
I believe it does. Yes.
As the California Supreme Court stated in this 1920 decision, as of 1879, Miller and Lux owned 36,644 of those acres, correct?
Correct.
Can we please go to Dr. Milton Berger's exhibit KWBA 29?
Excuse me.
Dr. Milton Berger, this exhibit is the complete transcript on appeal of the title insurance versus Miller and Lux case, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 6, which shows part of the index of this transcript? On the left-hand page, numbered Roman 6, you see that there's a list of witnesses for the defendants.
Yes.
Miller and Lux was one of the defendants, correct?
Correct.
Do you see that one of the witnesses defendants was someone named CZ Merritt?
Yes.
Do you see that Mr. Merritt's testimony began on page 440 and ended by page 4, or excuse me, let me go back. Do you see that Mr. Merritt's testimony began on page 440 and ended at before page 545?
Yes.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 228? Dr. Milton Berger, do you see that these are pages 440 and 441 of the transcript?
Yes.
On these pages, did Mr. Merritt testify that he was Miller and Lux's office manager?
Yes.
And he also testified he began working for Miller and Lux in 1881. Is that right?
That's right. And I think some of this we covered in the case in chief, some of the questions you asked here.
Thank you. The trial in the title insurance case started in 1913, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 278? Dr. Milton Berger, do you see that this is pages 540 and 541 of the transcript?
Yes.
Do you understand that these present Mr. Merritt's testimony?
Yes, I believe it's a portion of his testimony.
Okay, thank you. So I want to locate us for the next question. On transcript page 541, can you locate the portion between the numbers 1622 and 1623? Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you see he was testifying about a reservoir association?
Yes.
Do you understand that to be an association of parties to manage Buena Vista Lake Reservoir?
Yes, and I discussed that in my written testimony in the case in chief.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 279, just the next page? Dr. Milton Berger, do you see on page 543 of the transcript, there's a typewritten copy of what's called an account?
Can you direct me more specifically?
Sure. Do you see on transcript page 543, there's a line at one point on the page?
Yes.
And below that, there's a typewritten copy of something called an account, correct?
Correct.
And it's dated as beginning April 30th, 1906. Is that right?
That's right.
You see that it contains a list of landowners below it,
Yes.
and the total acreage owned by those landowners as of 1906 was 98,188 acres. You see that?
Well, I see that's listed as, yes, I see that listed as a total acreage. I don't know if that was all of the lands that each of these entities owned in the basin.
Okay. Do you see that as of this 1906 statement, Miller and Lux owned 82,688 acres?
That's what's listed, yes.
And so I think you just said you don't know whether that was all the lands Miller and Lux owned in the basin. Is that right?
That's correct. And I think I might elaborate a little bit more on that. I think assessments of their southern division, which included more lands in the Kern River Basin and in the South San Joaquin Valley, was quite a bit larger.
And understood. You understand that this statement concerns the management of Buena Vista Lake Reservoir?
Yes.
And for those purposes, Miller and Lux owned 82,688 acres as of 1906, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 198? Dr. Miltenberger, do you see this page contains transcript pages 380 and 381?
Yes.
And you see towards the bottom of transcript page 380, there's a document called Exhibit Number 2.
Yes.
Do you see that is a statement of expenses and revenues associated with Buena Vista Lake Reservoir as of 1909 and 1910?
Well, it appears to include a lot of, or aggregate a lot of financial information from, it appears to be from March 30th, 1909 to September 30th, 1910. And there's additional things that encompass, additional time frame that's encompassed by that as well.
Thank you. Do you see this account states that as of those dates, Miller and Lux owned 82,668 acres?
Yes. Excuse me.
Do you see on transcript page 381, it states that there were credits to the association as a result of water sales to oil companies?
Yes, I see the exhibit also contained credits by water sold from Buena Vista Lake Reservoir.
To oil companies, correct?
To certain oil companies, correct.
Between February 1910 and September 1910, is that right?
Correct.
Do you see that the oil companies paid the Reservoir Association $6,724.52 for that water?
Yes.
Do you know how much money that equals in 2022 dollars?
Objection calls for speculation.
I think it's a yes or no question. So we'll start with the yes or no version of that question. Go ahead, Dr. Miltenberger.
I don't know offhand, Mr. Becerra. I do know that economic historians have a variety of ways of calculating the relative cost. I'm particularly familiar with a website by one economic historian that's peer sourced and reviewed that provides ways of calculating that. But I don't have the expertise to do that, especially now as I sit here.
Do you know whether that amount of $6,724 in 1910 could equal over $200,000 in 2022 dollars?
And that's where Mr. Bivens, I'm going to anticipate that you'll renew your objection, and I'll sustain it there. Let's move on, Mr. Becerra.
Dr. Miltenberger, do you see at the bottom of transcript page 381, there's exhibit number 3?
I do.
Do you see that it's another statement of the finances of the Buena Vista Lake Reservoir Association?
May we scroll to the next page, because I think it goes on to the next page.
Of course.
Yes, I do.
Ms. Mullen, can you please scroll back to the preceding page briefly? Dr. Miltenberger, do you see that that statement covers the period September 30th, 1910 to December 31st, 1911?
Yes.
Ms. Mullen, can we please now scroll back to the next page so we can take a look at
My apologies.
Dr. Miltenberger, do you need to take a break?
May we, please?
Yes, I think that's appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Becerra. Let's go ahead, and it is now 10:09. Let's take an 11-minute break. We'll come back at 10:20 and we'll resume.
Thank you.
Rosedale asking the agency for concurrent annexation of it done. John O'Neill, if we find it back to the green. But doing Article 21 here. That's what they reference. Interesting. Yeah. No, but the annexation, I'll go back and look. Not changing services, right? So I don't know what she'll mean from us. I'll read this, I'll look at it. The other thing too, is the little nuance here, probably not enough. What you care about the sunset annexation of this, it's still in Oregon and it's in Oregon. Actually, what? Yeah, we annexed in the non-service. contract for river water supply to
Dr. Miltenberger, are you there? I just wanted a couple spellings before we begin, so I can keep catching up. Yeah, you had Hammett's preliminary engineering report. Can you spell Hammett's for me?
Yes, HAMMATT.
And then lastly, Dr. Unruh, or Mr. Unruh, sorry, not Dr. Unruh or Inruh, or his testimony. I'm not sure who that is.
Not sure that Dr. Miltenberger referenced.
Oh,
Mr.
maybe it
Unruh,
wasn't Dr. Miltenberger.
But I can spell it for you.
Okay, great, thank you.
It's UNRUH.
Okay, great. I don't think I've seen that yet come up in the 5 days that I did. Thank you. That's all. I'm all caught up.
Thank you. It looks like we're all here. Excuse me for being a minute late. Let's go ahead. Dr. Miltenberger, are you prepared to proceed?
I am, and my apologies. I have still a bit of a lingering cough from a bout of COVID. So if that happens again, I'll endeavor to just shut off the mic just so it's not so disruptive.
No. There's no need to apologize, and I was concerned it may have been that particular affliction. So I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad you're back with us. And Mr. Becerra, I will turn back to you to continue your cross-examination.
And first of all, Dr. Miltenberger, if you need that kind of break, just let us know. I feel your pain on that. I am in a similar place.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to exhibit KVWA 29? And perfect. Thank you very much. Dr. Miltenberger, in an effort to expedite some of this, I'm going to just ask you a broad question. As you're sitting here today, would you be not able to convert dollar amounts from before 1914 to current dollars?
That's correct. I would not be able to, as I sit here today.
You would know how to do that afterwards, potentially, but not on the fly. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Miltenberger, can we please take a look at transcript page 382?
And actually, Mr. Becerra, just actually be very clear on that last point. I would make use of a series of tools that are available and peer reviewed. I myself, it's not a tool that I developed. So just to kind of be clear about what I would be able to do outside this setting.
Completely understood. Thank you for the clarification. Focusing on transcript page 382 and the statement from 1911. This one also states that Miller and Lux owned 82,668 acres at the time, correct?
Yes. And also just be additionally clear from the record, these are lands owned, not lands irrigated.
Okay, thank you. And do you see on this statement the oil companies paid $48,886.10 for water from the reservoir?
Yes.
Can you please shift your attention over to transcript page 383? This is another account statement for the Buena Vista Lake Reservoir Association, correct?
Correct.
And it covers the period January 31st through December 12th, 1912. Is that accurate?
Well, that specifically covers the maintenance of the work. I think that there may also cover some additional costs from an earlier time.
Okay, thank you. Do you see in this statement, Miller and Lux is stated as owning 82,688 acres?
Yes.
And you also see that it states that the oil companies paid $18,488.71 for water from the reservoir.
I see, and maybe this is what you said, but I want to be clear. I see it says that the oil companies, the sum of $18,458.71.
And so we've reviewed a number of these statements from before 1914, correct?
Correct.
And they all treat sales of water to oil companies as offsets against the expenses of running Buena Vista Lake Reservoir. Is that accurate?
I'm not entirely sure of that because I'm not parsed all of this. I do know that they paid certain sums.
Okay, thank you.
They being the oil companies.
The oil companies. Okay, can we please go to Dr. Miltenberger's PowerPoint presentation, KBWA 37, and go to PDF page 3. Dr. Miltenberger, on this page, you quote text from Catherine Miller's book, Flooding the Courtrooms. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you rely on Ms. Miller's book in your testimony, correct?
Well, I utilize it. Yes, I wouldn't say that I necessarily rely on it for the truth of the issues involved here, but rather it's just a reflection of the historical, the historiography, the historical scholarship.
You rely on it to support your opinion that Miller and Lux was primarily focused on livestock operations before 1914, correct?
Yeah, shouldn't misstates testimony.
I'll allow it because I think Dr. Miltenberger is going to do a fine job of explaining what exactly he means. So go ahead, Dr. Miltenberger.
Sure. I do, but not in the sense that I'm relying upon it as a primary source document.
Do you not consider those statements by Ms. Miller to be true?
That's not what I'm saying. I agree with the statements.
Okay, can we please pull up Dr. Miltenberger's testimony, KWBA 25, and go to page 3 in paragraph 5. Or actually, paragraph 4 is better. Dr. Miltenberger, you rely on Ms. Miller's book in stating your opinions in paragraph 4, correct?
Well, specifically here, I'm referencing what Dr. Littlefield relying on Miller's work.
Okay, and in paragraph 5, you rely on Ms. Miller's book, correct?
Yes, I go on to indicate the additional parts of her conclusions.
Okay, and you rely on that for the opinion that Miller and Lux was primarily focused on livestock operations before 1914, correct?
I rely on it, but I would again sort of use caveat my response or qualify my response by saying this isn't solely what I rely upon. I rely upon the primary source record that I've reviewed and discussed, both in the case in chief and in my rebuttal testimony here.
Okay, so let me clarify. Ms. Miller's book is one of the sources you rely upon for that opinion. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Thank you. Can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 813? It's a cross-examination exhibit? Yes, thank you. And Ms. Mullen, can you please scroll through the exhibits? Dr. Miltenberger, I'll represent this as excerpts of Ms. Miller's book, but please scroll through them to the extent you need to confirm that fact.
Ms. Mullen, were those the only pages in the exhibit?
I'll represent, yes, they are.
It does appear to be excerpts of Miller's book, Flooding the Courtrooms.
Thank you very much. And you submitted other excerpts of this book as an exhibit of your own, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can you please scroll till you see the book? I believe it's PDF page 3, book page 21. There you go. Dr. Miltenberger, do you see in the paragraph that begins hydropower interests that Ms. Miller describes how hydropower interests started to build on the Kern River in about 1902?
I see the paragraph that begins hydroelectric power interests began exploring the Kern and San Joaquin rivers in the late 1890s.
And you see about halfway down, there's a sentence that begins in 1902.
Yes, I see that.
And there it states that a hydropower company prepared to open a plant on the Kern River, and Miller and Lux protested. Is that right?
Yes, along with Kern County Land Company.
And that was in 1902. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we please scroll to the next PDF page, book page 22? And Dr. Miltenberger, just generally, was hydroelectric generation a new technology as of 1902, to the best of your knowledge?
It was a relatively new technology.
Do you know whether the first hydroelectric plants in California began operating in the 1890s?
I'd have to refresh my memory on that specific point.
Okay. Do you see the middle paragraph on page 22 of the book that begins, however, as quickly as?
Yes.
And do you understand that paragraph to say that Miller and Lux and others filed a lawsuit against that hydroelectric operation in 1905?
I would need to review the paragraph.
Please go ahead.
I finished reviewing. Would you please repeat the question?
Sure. Do you see in that paragraph, Ms. Miller describes how Miller and Lux and others sued Edison Electric Company concerning its hydroelectric plant in 1905?
Yes, I see they filed a complaint.
Okay. And going down to the next paragraph, do you see in what year Ms. Miller describes Edison, Miller and Lux and others as having reached an agreement about the matter?
And I'm going to object at this point as that this line of questioning is outside the scope of Dr. Miltenberger's rebuttal testimony, which relies on Miller's book for a very, very limited purpose. If we're going to open up cross-examination on rebuttal to every page and theme discussed in the historical record, I think we'll be here a long time.
And first, I believe I was reprimanded for speaking objections, so I'd like to keep our objections tight. And second, I disagree with the relevance. Dr. Miltenberger relied on this for a statement about the scope of Miller and Lux's operations.
I was thinking we'd go back and look and see exactly what Dr. Miltenberger relied on, but I would like to see where this line of questioning is going, so let's not bother with it. But I will ask you, Mr. Becerra, do you have a, well, you,
Look,
this process
I-
is short because you only have a few pages in the documents that you've copied here. So let's go ahead and objection is overruled. Please proceed with your questions, Mr. Becerra.
Dr. Miltenberger, do you see on the last paragraph of page 22, it states that by 1906, Edison Electric had agreed to pay Miller and Lux and others $350,000 concerning the hydroelectric plants?
In your first question, I started reading the paragraph. I'd like to, I didn't complete reading the paragraph, so I'd like to complete reading it.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Maybe we scroll to the next page. Would you please repeat your question, Mr. Becerra?
Sure.
My apologies, I didn't. I was
Do you
focused on.
see in that paragraph, Ms. Miller states that by 1906, Edison Electric Company had agreed to pay Miller and Lux and others $350,000 related to hydroelectric operations on the Kern River.
Ms. Mullen, could you scroll up one more page so we can get back in that particular section? Well, I read it here. Edison was to pay Miller and Lux and the Kern County Land Company $350,000, ostensibly to allow them to buy up the remaining independent riparian properties.
So in 1906, Edison agreed to pay Miller and Lux and others $350,000, correct?
Correct.
Concerning Edison's hydroelectric facilities on the Kern River. Is that accurate?
Well, as I would read this, I would think that I would characterize it a little bit differently, that it was an element of consideration for this contract that had been drawn up.
Okay, Ms. Mullen, can we please go to exhibit KBWA 29, which is the title insurance transcript, and go to PDF page 263. Dr. Miltenberger, do you see on, you see the PDF page 63 contains transcript pages 510 and 511?
Yes.
Do you see on PDF, or do you see on transcript page 510, that appears to be the 1906 contract involving Edison Electric and Miller and Lux?
Yes.
Do you see that Edison Electric was to pay the other parties $350,000 within 6 months?
Yes.
That payment was to occur in 1906, correct? Or I'm sorry, it wasn't. That payment probably was to occur in 1907, correct?
Yes, considering the agreement was in October of 1906 and the $250,000 was paid on or before 6 months subsequent. Yes.
And so the payment obviously was to be in 1907 dollars, correct?
I don't know if I could say that for sure. Not knowing the relative difference between $1906 and $1907.
Understood. Thank you very much. Can we please go to PDF page 300 of the transcript? Okay, this is going to be a somewhat different subject, though it's same terms, same transcript. Do you see that PDF page 300 includes transcript page 584?
Yes.
And you quote this page of testimony in your testimony, correct?
Yes, this is a portion of James Ogden's testimony.
You read my mind. I was going to ask you to confirm that. Do you understand Mr. Ogden was the superintendent of Miller and Lux's Kern County ranches at the time?
Yes.
Do you see in the first paragraph on transcript page 584, Mr. Ogden refers to land north of Township 28?
I see that he says this part of the property Miller and Lux has under canals from headquarters north, the north line of Township 28.
Do you understand the north line of Township 28 is in the approximate location of Wasco Road?
My recollection is that Wasco Road is the north line of Township 27, which is to the north of 28.
Okay.
I would have to be assured, I would want to double check that relative to a map.
Okay. Why don't we do that? Can we, Ms. Mullen, can we please go to Dr. Miltenberger's? Just a second. Dr. Miltenberger's exhibit KWBA 30. And Ms. Mullen, can you scroll down a little there so Dr. Miltenberger can see that full page? Dr. Miltenberger, is this the 1919 Lippincott means report?
Yes.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 207? And Dr. Miltenberger, do you recognize this document as the Lippincott means report's map of Miller and Lux's lands as of 1919?
Well, the quality here is unfortunately rather diminished. I believe this specifically is a map that Thomas Means marked up, classifying lands within that southern division.
It's the legend for this map is the map of the lands of Miller and Lux Incorporated, correct?
Yeah, yes, that is the base for this.
Okay. And Ms. Mullen, can we expand on? I just want to expand on the handwritten words. I believe it's Wasco Road. About 3/4 of the way down what you're showing us currently. There you go. Dr. Miltenberger, do you see where it states Wasco Road on the map?
Yes, it's written in pencil,
Yes.
or appears to be written in pencil.
Does the line that Wasco Road labels, does that conform to your understanding of where Wasco Road is located?
Yes, that would be the north line of the Township 27.
And does this map indicate that Miller and Lux owned significant amounts of land north of Wasco Road as of 1919?
I'd have to tabulate the approximate section shown, but yes, it shows that they owned land north of Wasco Road.
Is it fair to say they own thousands of acres of land north of Wasco Road?
Possibly. There's quite a bit of land that's shown here north of Wasco Road.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to Exhibit KWBA 29, the transcript? Thank you. And can we go to the preceding PDF page? Dr. Miltenberger, do you see that this page shows transcript pages 582 and 583?
Yes.
Okay. And on transcript page 583, do you see where below the number 714, Mr. Ogden is testifying about what became of water that could not be stored in Buena Vista Lake?
I don't see the number 714.
I'm sorry, 1714. My apologies.
1714?
Correct.
I actually don't see 1714 here.
You may be on the wrong page, Mr. Becerra.
On transcript page 583, do you see the top?
I do.
And on the left-hand margin, there's a number 1714.
No.
I apologize. My mistake. I meant 1749. My apologies.
I just wanted to be clear.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Apologies.
I see the line 1749.
Thank you. Below that line, do you see Mr. Ogden was testifying about what became of water that could not be stored in Buena Vista Lake?
Yes.
And it would flow down towards Tulare Lake, is that right?
Into Tulare Lake, yes.
And Miller and Lux owned significant amounts of land between Wasco Road and Tulare Lake, correct?
Yes, they own lands between Wasco Road and Tulare Lake.
Do you know whether Miller and Lux used that water to support the growth of wild feed in that area between Wasco Road and Tulare Lake?
Yes, and I think I addressed that both in my rebuttal testimony and in my case in chief testimony. I believe for my case in chief testimony, that area wasn't put under regular irrigation because it was very difficult to get water that far downstream.
So do you understand Mr. Ogden to have testified that when water did get that far downstream, Miller and Lux used it to grow wild feed?
Yes, and I believe I addressed that in my rebuttal testimony.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to the Lippincott Means Report, KBWA 30? And Dr. Miltenberger, this report's from 1919, correct? And we can go to the first page if you need to.
That's correct, but just to be clear for the record, this comes from a separate report that was done by Thomas Means that's appended or included as part of the broader Lippincott Means report. And I believe if we scroll up, we could find the specific date for the Means report, which I think is October 1919.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 107? Does that confirm your understanding, Dr. Miltenberger?
It does. Thank you.
The Lippincott Means report predates the state's Bulletin 9. Is that right?
That's correct.
Bulletin 9 is from 1921. Is that right?
It was published in 1921. Yes.
And you state your opinion that Bulletin 9 presents the most reliable approximation of irrigated acreage within Buena Vista's current service area as of 1914. Is that right?
That's correct.
So Mr. Lippincott was a prominent water engineer. Is that right?
That's right.
Do you know whether he worked on Los Angeles's Owens River Aqueduct?
Yes, he did.
He was quite prominent, correct? So can we please go to PDF page 109, Ms. Mullen? Dr. Miltenberger, do you see that here Mr. Means described Miller and Lux as owning 55,000 acres of land once known as the Buena Vista Swamp?
Yes.
Do you also see that he describes the northern boundary of those 55,000 acres as being the highway between Wasco and Lost Hills?
That's part of the area, yes.
Do you understand that highway to be what we've called Wasco Road?
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can you please scroll down a little more? And Dr. Miltenberger, do you see after the statement about Wasco and Lost Hills, Mr. Means states that Miller and Lux also owned an area of 65,000 acres lying north of that road?
Yes.
And those acres are not within Buena Vista's current service area, is that right?
That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to PDF page 207? And scroll down, please. Thank you. So Dr. Miltenberger, we talked about this earlier. Do you see the notation Wasco Road again?
Yes.
And south of that road, Mr. Means showed an area that is essentially Buena Vista's existing Buttonwillow service area. Is that right?
Well, I think it's important to note that even below, north of Wasco or south of Wasco Road is a useful geographic point for us to understand. But there were additional lands south of Wasco Road that were excluded from the service area. I think that's one of the reasons why I geo-referenced the two particular service areas and plotted those on map number 2 from the main Lippincott Means report.
Do you see on this map, PDF page 207, there's an area south of Wasco Road shaded in light green?
Yes, I can make some of that out. It's a little faint in this copy, unfortunately.
Do you see in that area, there's many lines drawn through that area. Do you see that?
Could you be more specific as that area?
Yes. You have a general understanding of the boundaries of Buena Vista's current Buttonwillow service area, is that right?
Yes.
the area shaded in light green south of Wasco Road, does that appear to be essentially the lands covered by the Buttonwillow service area?
It's very generally the area. Again, there were lands even south of Wasco Road that weren't part of the ultimate district.
Do you see in that light green shaded area, there are many lines drawn through it?
I see those lines starting about the north part of Township 28. So a township south of Wasco Road.
And they continue southeast to, I believe it's approximately Township 30, or range 30, Township 25, I think. Is that about right?
That seems about right. Again, this resolution's not.
Ms. Mullen, can we blow this up some, make it a little easier? And then move this image up, please. A little bit more. Thank you. And do you see within that light green shaded area, there are many irregular lines drawn?
Yes.
Do you know whether those were canals that existed as of 1919?
I think some of them may have been canals. I think much of this is sort of plotted in Hammett's reevaluation report.
So do you believe that as of 1919, there were that many canals within what is now the Buttonwillow service area?
Well, I think we have to be more precise. I think some of these lines probably encompass drainage facilities as well. And I think there's better documentation of precisely what these lines are. So I think these are some canals, but they may not all be canals. And I only say that because it's not specifically identified that way on this map that I can see.
I understand. To the extent there were canals, do you know whether Miller and Lux built all of them by 1919?
Well, I think there's evidence that Miller and Lux built some of them and others were built by tenants.
So you believe some of the canals that may be shown here were built by Miller and Lux's tenants before 1919? Is that right?
Objection, misstates testimony.
Overruled.
May you please repeat the question, Mr. Becerra?
Do you believe that to the extent the lines shown here in what is now the Buttonwillow service area are canals, they may have been built by Miller and Lux's tenants?
Yes, some portion may have been built by Miller and Lux's tenants.
Okay, thank you. Can we, in your rebuttal testimony, you critique Dr. Littlefield's identification of the Kern Valley Water Company canal, correct?
Correct. Or I should say misidentification of it as the West Side Canal.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 11 in this exhibit? Again, just for the record, we're in exhibit KBWA 30. Dr. Miltenberger, this page was prepared by Mr. Lippincott, correct?
Yes, I believe this is from the Lippincott portion of the Lippincott Means Report.
Okay, and Ms. Mullen, can we please scroll down to the fourth paragraph that begins the Kern Valley Canal Company? Thank you. In that paragraph, do you think Mr. Lippincott mixed up Kern Valley Canal Company with Kern Valley Water Company?
Yes, I think he incorrectly identifies it.
Do you think Kern Valley Canal Company is really supposed to be Kern Valley Water Company?
Yes.
And do you see in that sentence, he identifies that company as owning, quote, the West Side Canal?
Yes.
And do you see 2 lines down, he describes the canal as being sufficient to carry floodwaters?
Yes.
Do you think he's accurately referring to the West Side Canal in his report?
I don't think he's accurately referring to the West Side Canal as we know it today.
Do you think he's referring to what we now call the flood channel canal?
Yes.
But he calls it the West Side Canal, correct?
He does.
And then in the last sentence in that paragraph, he also refers to it as the outside or Buena Vista Canal. Is that right?
Yes.
So is it fair to say Mr. Lippincott was not especially precise in how he described that canal?
I'm not exactly certain if I would characterize it that way. I think I would characterize it as that that he didn't identify it as the Kern Valley Water Company canal, and he didn't identify it in the same way we do today.
Okay, thank you. Do you see in that paragraph, Mr. Lippincott said that canal could be used for both carrying floodwaters and irrigation?
He does note that it was for flood. He notes that it was sufficient size to carry floodwaters and also used for irrigation. But I think that may also reflect how ultimately the system was designed. As I explained in my case in chief testimony, the West Side Canal of today headed further downstream off of the Kern Valley Water Company canal. And in fact, water would be backed up and then diverted. So for a distance, that Kern Valley Reclamation Company canal did carry water that would ultimately be used to irrigate. But again, the irrigation was accomplished through that present day West Side Canal, not the flood channel, which was designed, as he states here, and as Harry Barnes and others note, to pass floodwaters.
You used the phrase in that answer, the Kern Valley Reclamation Company. Was that a different company than the Kern Valley Water Company?
I don't believe I did. I think I was referring to the Kern Valley Water Company canal, but there is a separate company called the Kern Valley Reclamation Company.
And what was the purpose of that company?
That company, as I understand it, was intended to extend the flood channel further north.
Was Miller and Lux involved in that company?
I believe they were. That the precise composition of the company, I would have to refresh my memory.
Going back to Mr. Lippincott's paragraph that begins Kern Valley Canal Company, if you assume in that paragraph he's talking about today's flood channel canal, would that have canal routed floodwaters north of Wasco Road as of 1919?
I believe it did, yes.
So it could have routed waters to Miller and Lux's lands north of Wasco Road?
Yes, and I think some of that's also, again, addressed in my case in chief. Okay. Lands that aren't in the district.
Lands that aren't in the district, yes. Can we please, Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to Dr. Miltenberger's rebuttal testimony, KWBA 25? And go to page 11. Oh, actually, can we please go to the preceding page? Thank you. And looking for paragraph 21. Dr. Miltenberger, in this paragraph, you refer to water that flowed north of Wasco Road as surplus to Miller and Lux's needs. Is that right?
Yes, that's what I state there.
Is it your opinion that Miller and Lux's lands located north of Wasco Road did not need water?
No, and I think I can clarify what my meaning here was, that they were surplus to Miller and Lux's needs, certainly south of Wasco Road.
So when you
Land
say
within the district, just to be clear, lands within there today within the district.
So your statement here on lines 1 through 4, when you refer to Miller and Lux's needs, are you only referring to their needs south of Wasco Road?
That's the focus of my historical analysis, is the lands that today are within Buena Vista Water Storage District.
Your historical analysis does not concern any use of water on Miller and Lux's lands outside of Buena Vista? Is that right?
I wouldn't characterize it quite that way. In my case in chief testimony, I do discuss how these waters were utilized north of Wasco Road, and as I state here, ultimately form the basis for the Lower River rights that are set forth in the 1962 agreement. I also note in my case in chief testimony that Tulare Water Company, which in fact was a subsidiary of Miller and Lux, endeavored to get an appropriation for these flows north of Wasco Road, and were ultimately denied by the State Water Board because the water was considered too irregular to afford a sufficient supply. So I do address it to some degree. And as I noted earlier in this line of questioning, I discuss that Miller and Lux didn't put their lands north of Wasco Road under any kind of regular irrigation. This is discussed in my case in chief testimony. They did so because the water supply wasn't always sufficient for those lands.
Thank you. But you believe their lands north of Wasco Road did need water as of 1919. Is that right?
Objection. Vegas to need.
Sustained.
Okay. On line 4, Dr. Miltenberger, you used the term Miller and Lux's needs, correct?
Correct.
In that place, you are only referring to south of Wasco Road, correct?
I'm referring to the lands within the district, the future lands of the district, and those would be south of Wasco Road.
Using your definition of need here, do you believe that the lands Miller and Lux owned north of Wasco Road needed water?
Well, I think that's not necessarily an easy question to answer, because a lot went to whatever Miller and Lux's calculus was in any given year for what they could get out of those lands. I mean, if they may have sufficient rainfall, perhaps they just used it as Ogden suggests in his 1913 testimony, just as well feed, and they just ran the cattle or sheep or hogs out there. I think it really vary based probably on the given year as to how they're utilizing or thinking about those lands. And as I said, the focus of my analysis was really the lands within the future district.
Thank you. Going down to the next page in your testimony, exhibit KWBA 25. All right. Yes, in paragraph 24, you quote a report by Mr. Hammett, correct?
Correct.
And based on that report, you describe certain water as waste. Is that right?
Well, this was water that Hammett determined as waste from the reservoir. And in this specific context, and this is why I wanted to clarify this in my presentation, where he's referring to the reservoir here, he's referring to a proposed future Isabella reservoir.
So it is not your testimony that the water you identify as waste would actually go unused. Is that right?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Let me break it up. You are describing waste here as water that could not be stored in a proposed Isabella reservoir. Is that right?
I am reporting what Hammett identifies as waste.
Okay. Can we please go to Dr. Miltenberger's exhibit KWBA 32? which is a copy of the 1922 Hammett report. And Ms. Mullen, could we please scroll down to the title page so Dr. Miltenberger can make sure? Do you see that, Dr. Miltenberger?
I do. I do.
Okay. Can we please go to PDF page 14, which is document page 11? Is this the table from which you obtained the quote waste figures in paragraph 24 of your testimony?
Yes, I believe so.
And at the top of this page, it refers to reservoir capacity. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it states the reservoir capacity, I believe, is 65,000 acre feet. Is that right?
That's right.
What do you understand that reservoir capacity represents in the Hammett report?
I'd have to refresh my memory by reference. I think he discusses it in the preceding pages. But I believe it represents some component of storage in mountain storage, as they were referring to it.
Mountain storage. Okay, can we please go to PDF page 12, Ms. Mullen? And do you see, this is document page 9, Dr. Miltenberger, about halfway down the second paragraph, do you see a sentence that begins for a capacity?
Yes.
And do you see that it refers to a proposed Isabella Reservoir of 300,000 acre feet?
I do.
And do you see that sentence identifies the second point component of that as 65,000 acre feet?
Yes, this refreshes my memory on that point.
Do you know how large Lake Isabella is after actual construction?
I think I did it one time. I don't know precisely offhand, and I know today it's somewhat less because of ongoing work.
Okay, thank you. Do you see this second paragraph on the page? It refers to a table showing the operation of the proposed reservoir. Is that right?
I'm having a little difficulty finding.
Okay.
Ms. Mullen, could we please just zoom in a little bit to help me out on the maybe 1 or 2 clicks? Thank you.
And I apologize. I think we should be in the top paragraph. See, we're talking about a reservoir capacity of 300,000 acre feet.
I do.
And that's the reservoir in which there would be 65,000 acre feet of capacity for second point. Correct?
Right.
And so the numbers you identified as quote waste in your testimony would be what could not be stored in a reservoir capacity of 65,000 acre feet. Is that right?
Again, yes, with the caveat that I'm not identifying this as waste, but Hammett is identifying this as waste.
Understood. And Ms. Mullen, can I confirm we're on document page 12? I've sort of lost track of the number. Ah, that's the issue. Can we please go to PDF page 15? There we go. Now, the bottom of this page, document page 12, PDF page 15, identifies the table that identified the waste, quote unquote waste, correct?
Yes, this is referencing the table on the preceding page.
And in the last sentence in this paragraph, Mr. Hammett said, quote, "This waste can easily be sent down to the lower lands of the district directly." Do you see that?
I do.
Do you understand that to mean Mr. Hammett is saying the quote waste could be used within Buena Vista?
Well, what I understand to mean is that it would be used within a Buena Vista water storage district that was considerably larger than the current district. I believe this preliminary engineering report covered a district of 122,000, or maybe 125,000 acres, rather than the smaller district that was ultimately approved.
Okay. So do you understand that sentence to state that Mr. Hammett believed that quote waste could be put to beneficial use downstream?
Well, I understand we say the waste could easily be sent down to the lower lands of the district directly.
Do you see the second part of that sentence where he also says this quote waste could be stored in Buena Vista Reservoir?
Yes, and in fact, this is why I felt the need to clarify my discussion of paragraph 24, my presentation. I simply offer that this is corroborating evidence from Ogden's own testimony years prior, that there were years of excessive water. And in this case, with the management that Isabella Reservoir would provide, that, I think Hammett's getting to the point that changes the calculus of things. I'm not relying upon it for that. Rather, I'm simply saying that Hammett recognized there were years of excess water and that those years could be managed through a mountain storage facility. That didn't come through in my discussion, but that was my intent in paragraph 24, is simply to note additional evidence that there was periods in the historic record where there was water excess, or there was a large body of water that couldn't be readily used. In this case, I see Hammett, just to finish my thought, I see Hammett as saying that water could be utilized in conjunction potentially with this facility. And we know this facility wasn't built for several years later.
And he also stated that quote waste could be stored in Buena Vista Reservoir. Is that right?
He says that here, yes.
And then it could be quote sent down during the times when most needed. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so can we please go back to Dr. Miltenberger's testimony, KBWA 25? So just to clarify for the record, Dr. Miltenberger, in paragraph 24, you now have clarified that when you use the term waste, you did not mean unuseful for beneficial use. Is that right?
Objection, misstates testimony.
Well, I can attempt again.
Sure, please.
Dr. Miltenberger, you have clarified that in paragraph 24, when you use the term waste, you do not mean lost to further beneficial use. Is that right?
I don't think that's what I was saying. What I was saying, a couple of different things. One is, first of all, I'm not making this statement. I'm not saying this was waste. I'm reporting what the consulting engineer to Miller and Lux identified as a category of water. I think that's important to understand from my testimony. And secondly, my objective in presenting this information was rather to just provide additional corroborating evidence of the existence of these periods in time in which there was excess water and water that would be passed north of Wasco Road. Now, Hammett utilized this information to articulate a means by which this water could potentially be utilized, but again, on a much larger district that encompass lands north of Wasco Road that are not part of the district today.
And Mr. Hammett also stated this quote, waste could be stored in what was then the existing Buena Vista Lake Reservoir, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Can we please go to, I believe it's page 22 in Dr. Miltenberger's testimony? And paragraph 51. So beginning on line 27, Dr. Miltenberger, you refer to widespread development of groundwater for irrigation purposes, correct?
Correct.
And it's your opinion that did not occur until the 1920s?
That's correct.
What do you mean by the term widespread here?
Well, I think what I'm referencing, or certainly what I had in mind, was the later statement by Sidney Harding, or later observation by Sidney Harding in 1929 about 50 wells that had been drilled in the past 2 years within that area. I believe he identifies as sort of south of Buttonwillow. To be more specific here, the last 2 years have been drilled south of the Buttonwillow Highway, excuse me.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we please scroll down to paragraph 53 on page 23?
And actually, maybe just to also round out my answer is that in looking at the information presented in the Lippincott Means Report, the groundwater facilities that were in existence circa 1919, that they more carefully or more extensively had there weren't dedicated irrigation wells, and rather there were wells doing multiple purposes, not the least of which was providing water for stock water. And also Lippincott's own characterization in his text that the wells south of Wasco Road were predominantly used for stock water.
Thank you. Can we please scroll down to page 23 and paragraph 53? Thank you. Dr. Miltenberger, I believe you obtained from the 1916 Mendenhall report information that report identified approximately 500 wells in Kern County. Is that right?
That's correct. There was a tabulation of approximately 500 wells.
And is it your understanding that Mendenhall and his team did the underlying field work between 1905 and 1907?
That's my recollection. Yes.
Okay. So these 500 wells that Mendenhall identified, they're not within your definition of widespread. Is that right?
No. And again, to sort of clarify, just referencing my earlier answer, when I'm talking about this widespread development, I specifically am thinking about the lands within the district, not the entirety of Kern County.
Understood. On line 16 and 17, I believe you summarized Mendenhall as identifying 88 irrigation wells in his report. Is that right?
Approximately 75 wells were dedicated irrigation wells, and an additional 13 had an irrigation component.
And were some of those owned by Miller and Lux?
I'm sorry, I missed the question because of my call.
Sure. Do you need a break?
I would like one.
Yes, let's
we've been
please
going
stop
for
there.
an hour.
Yes, we've been going for an hour, so that's a good time. Thanks, Mr. Becerra, for agreeing to a break. Let's go ahead and take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 11:35. Maybe Mr. Becerra, can you indicate before you just left? Sorry. Do you have just an estimate of additional costs that you have for Dr. Miltenberger?
I'd say 20 to 25 minutes.
Okay, good. So we'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll plan to come back and finish your cross before we take a lunch break. So let's come back at 11:35. Thank you. right, I see the four of us are back, so I will turn things back over to you, Mr. Becerra. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 30, which is the Lippincott Means Report? And go to PDF page 206. Thank you. And Ms. Mullen, could we please expand on the yellow shaded area? Thank you. Dr. Miltenberger, this map from the Lippincott Means Report shows wells as black dots with numbers next to them. Is that right?
That's correct.
And have you counted 29 of those wells being within what's currently Buena Vista's Buttonwillow service area?
Well, the Buttonwillow and Maples Ranch service area. And that's shown on, I'm sorry, just to be clear, that's shown on a separate exhibit.
Okay, thank you. And you concluded that Miller and Lux own 17 of those 29 wells, is that right?
Yes, based upon a review of the well data table.
So other landowners own the rest of those 29 wells within the current Buena Vista, is that right?
That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can you please focus on the southern end of the area on the map with the green and yellow shading? Thank you. Right down there at the very end of that area. And can we blow that up a little bit? Thank you very much. Dr. Miltenberger, do you see the well numbered 274?
Yes.
And that well's within Buena Vista's existing service area, is that correct?
That's correct. And I believe that was the abattoir well.
You read my mind. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to exhibit Buena Vista 639? And go to PDF page 89. Dr. Miltenberger, this is the table of wells used to support that map. Is that right?
That's correct. And I think, though, as I noted in my rebuttal testimony, there is one well that's shown on the map that isn't on the table.
Oh, okay. Which one is that? What number is that?
I don't recall offhand.
Okay, that's
precisely which one it was, but I did note that as I was attempting to identify precisely which wells were in the Buttonwillow and Maples Ranch service areas. And I thought that perhaps I had a footnote or a statement about that.
That's fine, Dr. Miltenberger. We'll just focus on the table. Thank you. Ms. Mullen, we're going to need to look at well 274, which is right towards the bottom of this page. Great, amazing job, Ms. Mullen. Dr. Miltenberger, do you see well 274 on the table?
Yes.
And that well was owned by Miller and Lux, correct?
Correct.
And I believe you referred to it as the abattoir well, correct?
Correct.
And that notation occurs on the page, is that right?
That's right. It's at the very far, I believe the very far column.
And is abattoir a somewhat more pleasant word for slaughterhouse?
I believe it's French for slaughterhouse. Yes.
French for slaughterhouse. The French have a way. And so that was a well to serve Miller and Lux's abattoir within what is now Buena Vista, correct?
Correct.
And this table also identifies that well as having domestic irrigation and stock uses. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so 274, the uses of that included irrigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please scroll up on the table to well 246? Do you see that well, Dr. Meltenberger?
Yes, I do now.
And the table identifies it as owned by Miller and Lux, is that right?
That's correct.
And the table also identifies it as having stock watering and irrigation uses, correct?
Yes, I believe so. And this would be included in my, this well was included in my tabulation and characterization, the breakdown I provided during my, that I provided my rebuttal testimony and I provided previously in my oral presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to Dr. Miltenberger's exhibit KWBA 30, which is the Lippincott means report, and that map we were looking at? And now, Ms. Mullen, do you see the words Lost Hills about 3/4 of the way up the page? Can you focus on that area, please? And thank you very much. Just a little bit more, please, so we can see the well numbers. Just, thank you. So, Dr. Miltenberger, do you see the well 246 here on the page?
I do. It seems to be just due south of the red line, denoting the Wasco Road.
So this well would be within what's currently Buena Vista, correct?
Well, again, I prefer the exhibit that I prepared that outlines more precisely what the district is. I believe so, but I think that exhibit better exemplifies what's in and what's out the district.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Mullen, and just to confirm, the well table identified well 246 as having an irrigation use, correct?
I believe so, but I'd like to refresh my memory if we may go back just for a moment.
Certainly. Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to Buena Vista 639? And we'll need to, yep, thank you.
Yes, I see that, stock and irrigation.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to Dr. Miltenberger's testimony, KWBA 25 and page 27? Thank you. And in paragraphs 64 and 65, you're discussing the 1927 district plan. Is that right?
Well, I discussed the district plan, and I believe I also discussed the 1926 valuation report in paragraph 65.
Okay. And the 1927 district plan is sometimes also called the Hyatt report. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And just for clarity, when you're referring to the district plan, you're referring to exhibit Buena Vista 663, right?
Buena Vista 663 and KWBA 16.
Okay. Can we please go to exhibit Buena Vista 663, Ms. Mullen? And go to PDF page 8, please. And can we please scroll down to the piece that has the numbered paragraph 3? Thank you. Dr. Miltenberger, do you understand that in these section numbered 3, which continues on for a couple pages, that's identifying what the report calls parcel 3?
I think it identifies it as tract 3, but yes.
Okay. And do you understand that parcel or tract 3 is essentially the lands within the current Buena Vista Button Willow service area?
Yes.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 50? Thank you. Do you see where the district plan here discusses bulletin 9?
Yes.
And you rely on bulletin 9 as stating, in your opinion, the most reliable representation of irrigated acreage within Buena Vista as of 1914, correct?
Actually, I believe I say it's the most reliable approximation.
Thank you. Do you see in this paragraph that discusses bulletin 9, the district plan discusses conveyance losses to and from Buena Vista Reservoir?
Yes.
That water would have come from water diverted under the second point entitlement, correct?
Correct.
Do you understand this paragraph to state that that water was recharging what is now Buena Vista service area?
I wouldn't characterize it that way.
Okay. Do you see where it discusses parcel 3?
Yes.
Do you see at the top of the paragraph, it discusses large losses are recorded in advance to and from Buena Vista Reservoir?
Yes.
And do you see where there is little doubt, where the report states there is little doubt that this water recharges parcel 3?
That's what's stated there.
Okay, thank you. Can we please go back to Dr. Miltenberger's testimony, KWBA 25, and go to the bottom of page 11? Thank you. I'm going to try to summarize generally some of your points here. Correct me if I get the summary wrong, please. Beginning with paragraph 25, you discussed Buena Vista Lake Reservoir all the way down to paragraph 34. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you generally summarize a number of reports as stating that Buena Vista Lake Reservoir was inefficient. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 100? And can we scroll down so Dr. Miltenberger can see the title? Dr. Miltenberger, do you see that this is the testimony of current Water Bank Authority's witness, Jeffrey Davids?
Yes, I see this as Dr. David's testimony.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to the bottom of PDF page 10? and to paragraph 17. Thank you. Do you see here, Dr. Miltenberger, that Dr. Davids testified that Buena Vista continued to use Buena Vista Lake for storage? He says until the 60s.
Can we scroll down so I can read the full paragraph?
Certainly.
Maybe we go back up just to bring us back to where we were. Yeah, I see that. I see that.
Lake Isabella was completed in 1953. Is that right?
That's correct.
So do you know whether storage shifted to Isabella in 1953?
Well, I know that there was a series of interim agreements that were executed to store water in there with the U.S. government prior to leading to the final permanent contract.
And was the contract in the 60s?
Yes.
Do you disagree with Dr. David's opinion that Buena Vista continued to use Buena Vista Lake Reservoir for storage until at least the 1950s?
No, I believe that they continue to use Buena Vista Lake Reservoir.
Okay. Do you see on Dr. David's testimony lines 26 and 27, he refers to an aerial image from 1946?
Yes.
And do you see that's exhibit KWBA 112?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 112? Do you see this, Dr. Mellenberger, do you see this as the aerial image Dr. David's referenced?
Yes.
Do you see that this shows Buena Vista Lake Reservoir as being relatively full of water in 1946?
Well, as of the date of this aerial mosaic, this actually appears to be an aerial mosaic, so it's a composite image, I believe, of several aerial photographs. So yes, as of the date of the photograph.
And before Isabella was completed in 1953, was Buena Vista Lake Reservoir the largest storage reservoir on the Kern River?
I'm aware of no other.
So notwithstanding the opinions that it was inefficient, it was continued to be used until Isabella was completed, correct?
Correct. I mean, it was the only facility that would provide for the usage of the water under the second point entitlement.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Kinsey, that completes my cross-examination of Dr. Miltenberger.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra, and thank you, Dr. Miltenberger. I will turn to the parties. I think it's appropriate for us to take a lunch break, and then I'll turn to the other parties to see if they have additional questions for Dr. Miltenberger. But before we break for lunch, my plan would be to do an hour lunch. We could meet back at 1 p.m. just to round it out. But I'll look to the room. Is there anything anyone would like to raise before we take our lunch break?
Just one point, Ms. Kinsey.
Yes.
If last time I checked, I don't think your staff had moved exhibit Buena Vista 813 over to the FTP site. If that could happen, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. And they are listening, so please, let's please move it over to the FTP site.
Thank you very much.
Anything else before we break? All right, let's plan to meet back at 1 p.m. and we will pick up. I will ask whether anyone has additional cross-examination questions for Dr. Miltenberger, and we will move on from there. Thank you so much to all of you, and I will see you in an hour.
Ms. Kinsey, one quick, do we need to
Yes.
log off of the?
Oh, thank you. Yes,
Training come back.
you either need to log off or you will be booted off. So I guess it's up to you. But the best thing to do would be to log off. And this is just for those that don't know, it's for our YouTube streaming. But please log off and then log back on using the same credentials. Thank you, Mr. Becerra.